Namaste everyone, welcome to our Wednesday's Interfaith Dialogue. It is great pleasure to be with you all as usual. So today is our speaker, Dr. Wale Idris Ajibade. He is the Executive Director at African Views Organization. We are close friends, long time we are doing more cultural events than religious events, more spiritual and cultural events. Dr. Wale, you are welcome to present your thoughts, your experience for 30 to 40 minutes, then we'll ask questions. Please proceed.
Thank you so much. I hope you can hear me today. Thank you very much for inviting me to this. I'm really delighted to be here, and I want to start really by thanking you individually. Guruji, you know how my heart is and where my heart is when it comes to you. But I also want to acknowledge Dr. Susanna. Reverend Susanna spoke at our event during the Spirit of Peace and Prosperity Conference, the World Prayers for Peace. And I was so impressed by every gesture she made because I've had a chance to watch the video over and over again, and I hope that she also has had a chance to watch that video. Really, I was very delighted to hear our reflections, our wisdom, and I want to really now use this opportunity to acknowledge all who supported the program and really acknowledge your deduction and your generosity in that program, Reverend Susanna. Some of you I have met, especially Honorable Gabriel Martinez. I believe we've met during the last year's Spirit of Peace program. You were quite supportive in helping with the media, also engaging the spiritual concessions and all the processions. Thank you very much. I don't have a full view, but Dr. Remy knows where she sits in my heart. She has a throne of gold there. So again, just really pleased to be with you. And you know, this kind of spiritual gathering is always overwhelming because of how we perceive it and how we receive it, and we the type of commitment that we predisposed to it. So again, my brother Dileepji, thank you again for inviting me to this event. I want to start with many things, but obviously I can only start with one. I mean, I want to speak about many things, but I would like to start first. Actually, I picked, this is a book that I wrote. It's a birthday book. Okay. I don't know if you can see it properly. And I wrote this book in a year. And that was a particular year of my sabbatical because in my life experience, I took a whole 10 years for my monk experience, if you would say. We'll get to that in a minute so you understand where I'm coming from. But one particular year, I decided to write my thoughts in a book within that decade. And oftentimes I would reflect on what was written on that particular day. And September 2nd today, I wrote down, love and fear are so much interrelated. You do not fear except you love. And you do not have real love except you conquer fear. Such interrelationship has the fear with 8 too. The seed of all commotions are phobic generated desires as well as the disappointments. Now, let me get back to that. So it takes a spiritual journey and to get to where we are today, each and every one of us. And even though you see much of our program is cultural, intellectual, economic, etc., I want to let you know that all of these, again, are rooted in spirituality. And I have had my own personal journey. As I mentioned to you, I had a long sabbatical, because a decade is a long time, especially for someone like me who knows and like to have fun. But the sabbatical was serious, and it was mostly spent in libraries and in temples. And I'll tell you, for that period of time, I had visited the Hindu temples here in the United States. In Jersey City, they knew me very well. I learned about the gods. I read the Mahabharata back and forth. I understand the Satyagraha, and I've dealt very well and delved into the depth of that and understand positions of Gandhi and many other of the Hindu pantheons. So from that, I'd moved to understand Buddhism, dealt with much of the deity which also exists in Buddhism, and all the various schisms around Buddhism as well. Obviously, I have spent enough time with Christian theology. I understand the Bible, and I've read much part of it, and I don't think there's a particular story or any particular chapter that I cannot converse on. I have also spent time understanding Islam through history and through the verses and so on and so forth. I understand the stories and the challenges as well. I'm trying to just reflect a little bit. I think the point that I'm making is not only for the fact that I was seeking God, which really was my intention. I wanted to see the differences in the religions, and I wanted to understand the authenticity of the religion itself. I have spent a lot of time also with Judaism, and did a lot of work to understand the bases of Judaism as well. So pretty much, whether academically or spiritual engagement, I have spent a great deal of time understanding various religions around the world, and I've studied them as well. I have also spent a lot of time on African religions. Well, actually, African spirituality, because we will miss the point if we say religion. And we also need to understand the difference between religion and spirituality. But what I learned over the time is that it comes down to the individual. It's a very interesting thing, because I understood from the onset, and I wanted to debunk that even in myself, that I was biased in going into the studies. So I was really honestly searching for truth. And what I wanted to see there is that there is something that delivers the soul, because that's the purpose of religion. Religion is something that's meant to cultivate the soul, discipline the spirit, and connect us to the universe, connect us to our environment, give us a moral compass, give us an ethical path, all of those things. And this is why religion itself is a subset of culture. See, culture is that encompassing whole. Um, and you know, one of the things we did at African Views was when we were putting together um, the indicators for social challenges, we found it necessary to include an indicator for religion there. And the way we measured it is to measure um, how many people were concentrated in various religions. And we realized, of course, take for instance, a country that is so familiar to some of us here, like Nigeria. Uh, in Africa, you have a great percentage of Christianity, a great percentage of Islam, Muslim observers, religion, and then you have other minority religions as well in those countries. Like, for instance, you'll be surprised how much of Buddhism you have in a country like Nigeria practicing. You would be surprised how much of Judaism you have there. You'll be surprised how much of Hinduism you have happening in Nigeria, as well as local traditional religions as well. And this was fascinating to see all of these things across all countries, across all countries. Uh, you know, we're able to see, for instance, in India, where you have a larger percentage of Hinduism and the various religion that's rising, even though challenges like Christianity, Islam, and so on and so forth. Again, we see this across everywhere, and when you come to the United States, you even find a greater percentage of diversity within religions. And it comes down to the question of, what is religion supposed to do for us? I mean, we understand what science is supposed to do for us. We understand what economics is supposed to do for us. We understand what math is supposed to do for us, or whatever subject in humanism that we want to take. The challenge that is in our front and becomes a burden of spiritualists and spiritual leaders like you, like the group, and many other people out there, is again to be able to deliver people to their authentic self, authentic in a way that is pure or purified from acculturated influences or dependencies. You see, many of us have traditions. We come from traditions of, God knows, maybe war or whatever the case may be. And we carry this burden in our psyche, and we believe that that is the path. And some religions or spirituality even reinforces that type of mindset or mentality, and we bring it to the society. So this is important because regardless of any type of system we set up in a society to govern, regulate the society, the people who are going to come administrate, orchestrate, or run the system still come with the type of traditions that they carry with them, and oftentimes will pervade that into a spoiled system. Now, I know I've said quite a lot here, and I would expect questions about it to clarify, but I believe that especially we here have very similar experiences. So the concept of delivering the individual to themselves is very important. It's very important. Take, for instance, you watch a beautiful movie, and say, for instance, it's a spiritual movie in this context. Now, there are all kinds of movies out there, but let's pick a spiritual movie. One that makes you reflect on yourself and say, wow, I could do better. And if you have a belief, say for instance in the leadership, it could be verses in the Veda or whatever, or in the Quran, that has a guiding focus, which allows us to adopt a mantra or principle that would allow us to navigate the maze and the challenges of our daily activities. These type of things are important, and as long as it helps us to be who we ought to be, who we are, who God has intended us to be, without putting the burden on someone else, that obviously should be the path. And this path is very individualistic. It's very challenging, but it's the goal, or at least the supposed goal for religion, in my view, that we are able to achieve that. But oftentimes, what we have seen is that many religions duplicate principles of solidarity, especially blind solidarity, to forge a group who could be tapped into at will for various needs of the institution that is built. This is a serious challenge for the world. It's a serious challenge, and we have suffered enormously from this type of acculturation over the years. So the responsibility rests on us as individuals to change this. I don't even want to begin to mention the various atrocities that have been perpetrated in the name of the religions, various religions that we hold very dear. We know this, but it is important, I believe, for us to continue to improve what ought to be and what brings human value out, because I believe that we haven't even reached the surface of human value. We've not even reached half the path, because there's so much potential to humanity, and I believe that we can get there. But it's going to rest on us. I don't want to feel like I'm preaching to the choir or colleagues here, but these are reflections that are coming through right now, and I just wanted to share with you as part of what I think that we need to keep in our handlings and our principles and our focus. Much of it has to do with the society that we live in. I mean, in our society today, we have these great challenges. Obviously, we have all kinds of conflicts, which starts, of course, with leadership, but also with the grassroots. And that's the big problem. Not only do we have a spoil system at the top, we have a really confused system at the bottom. And we have a struggling middle ground. So, that's why we do the Spirit of Peace, World Prayer for Peace event, so that we can really do our best to use our spirituality or our religious wisdom and individual prowess to bend the wave, if you will, to clear the path, because prayers have meanings, as you know, and words have power, and we've seen miracles happen. Uh, Many of us, and much of this has to. It's not just about the belief, because certain times, even if you don't believe, you're convinced to believe because of your experiences or what miracles God could deliver in order for you to see the path. So that's why we do these prayers, to uh, you know wet the land, sow the seeds, etc. Make sure that we have a receiving environment. And so far, God has always been answering our prayers. Just in our efforts over the years, Guru and Dr. Remy and myself have experienced some incredible miracles in our processes. And I'm so proud of those experiences, and really I can't thank you enough for the camaraderie and for giving me the opportunity to come and share my reflections here. Obviously there's lots to say, but I think I'll stop here and I'll answer any questions that you might have. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Wale. So we are going to open for question and answer. Those who like to ask questions, please go forward. Any questions?
I have a. Oh.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Dr. Idris, thank you for your speech. It's very interesting to understand your study of different religions. I was wondering if you're also familiar with Sikhism too. Because we use the concept hukam a lot in our tradition.
Yes, good day to you, sir. Sikhism, I think, is a really fantastic communal process. You know, again, as mentioned, we have used religion to cultivate groups. There's no doubt about that. And obviously, Sikhism is one of those groups that have become extremely strong and communal. In various religions, I think it exists to have those type of groups. In all religion, and perhaps even all spirituality, you have a group that is very strong and built on, very strong traditions. And most of the time is often to cultivate power. And there's no doubt about that. And perhaps there's nothing wrong with that in the type of world we live today, to cultivate that type of power. Because eventually, and I'll give you a good example, is to be able to produce an individual that's powerful enough to contribute to society. That's the positive side of things, right? And again, I will give you an example. In the little town of Hoboken, New Jersey, you have the mayor there, the new mayor. Well, it's no longer new, but became a mayor, and coming from being a Sikh as well, right? So again, that becomes a positive outcome. But again, we've seen many challenges and conflicts between Sikhism and other type of religions, both in India and outside of India. So it comes with the fact that there's very large room for improvement. And that's why I mentioned the example of the mayor of Hoboken, who again, coming from that religion and tradition, has come to use that value also to benefit the society. Okay, now we just got to make sure that nepotism doesn't follow, because that's really the challenges that groups bring. And I hope that you understand the truth that I'm sharing with you. And as I mentioned, that exists in many religions as well. Uh, you know, we have it in Judaism, for instance, we have it quite strongly. With the particular group there. We have it also in Christianity. It may not be obvious, but it's very strong. And of course, we have it in Islam and many, we just have it. And that's just human habit. And this is, again, the type of things that have been, that we have learned, and what religion supposed to purify us of. So it's very important that our leaders are very clear about these things, and that they do their best to navigate the group towards this understanding. So to answer your question, sir, yes, I am familiar with Sikhism. I think it's a powerful religion, but I think that there's room for improvement, sir. Thank you.
In the Sikh Holy Granth, we have also teachings of Sufi. Sufism by Baba Farid, who's got 30 to 40 pages in the Sikh Holy Granth, which are very close to what the Sikh views of Guru Nanak was, and they talk about the underlying oneness between the Western traditions and Eastern traditions, and that how religions are different ways, of course, but the summit is the same, which is the oneness. Once we realize that, then our differences becomes points of celebration instead of discrimination. While we all keep in our mind, we come from the same one source.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
May I have a word? This is Jasbir Bhatia from Orlando, Florida. And first of all, thank you so much for allowing me to join you today. And the fact that we are able to talk globally across continents is a great achievement. And that also has some thought-provoking situations that we in the mankind are moving away from tribalism to more towards a global community. Dr. Kirpal Singh just mentioned about oneness. I want to emphasize on that. The Guru Nanak's philosophy was purely focused on spirituality. Unfortunately, identity consciousness and traditionally directed lifestyles, they overpower the search for spirituality or pursuit of spirituality. And Guru Nanak's view that there's only one creator and creation. Between the creator and creation, there's oneness, there's unity and non-duality, that's what it's called. That should take us beyond this so-called identity consciousness. And after all, the purpose of all the spiritual masters, prophets, or what you may call them, like Lord Jesus, Guru Nanak, Muhammad, Buddha, their goal was to elevate, to try to guide mankind to elevate itself from animal consciousness to higher level of consciousness, more towards divinity. But unfortunately, mankind has created these religious empires, and mankind has been left to serve these empires rather than these religions serving mankind. It has become a opposite. The purpose is lost, and as a result of this, so much grief has come to mankind. So many wars have happened in the name of religion. So much killing, so much suffering has come. So what do you say about that?
Thank you, sir. Well, I was hoping that that question was not for me, because you're talking at a very high level. I said, you should be able to answer that. But I'll share my little opinion on that, if you don't mind. And, you know, obviously, the oneness of the world is the ultimate goal. And every time we get closer to it, we find a demagogue coming to push us further apart. To me, I think that's one of the jokes that God plays on us, just to allow us to have the fun and say, you know, you guys got to figure it out. I'll just mix it up a little more and see how you do. But in all seriousness, sir, I think that's exactly what I was talking about, that, you know, the group factor. I wrote a piece on importance of groups, power groups, actually. And it's on academia, and you can find it there, which really looked into different types of groups, both religious, professional, scientific, etc. And you mentioned it, sir, that we, as a group, the whole point of grouping is to cultivate some kind of power, so that there's power in the group, so there's a kind of cultural strength. And it makes sense, you know, it makes sense only because there is another group out there that you know is doing the same thing, and that you know the only way that you can deal with this is to form your own group. So of course there's no faulting of the groups or the groupings. The idea is who's going to start to resolve this, loosen this up, and without compromising the integrity of identity, sir. Because identity is so beautiful, identity is so important, and I don't think that we can, in any form or shape, compromise that, because there will always still be traditions, right? Will always be culture, since the culture is that which identifies us with a cultural, with a body of entity. Could be a power group, could be any type of group for that matter. It is, we are an extension of a body of people, and we carry that culture with us everywhere we go. But even with that culture, if we have a mindset of using that culture to benefit the whole, that's where value is, sir. And I've said this many times, and I think Guruji is aware of this, as well as Dr. Remy, that the whole principle of us all in the world, the world as a whole, which has many parts, individualistic parts, that the purpose of the whole must be to ensure that the individual can perform and produce with its maximum strength. So therefore, it's important to strengthen the individual. That means the subset of the group, the subset of the whole. This is important, sir. So therefore, if the part has a tradition, a single identity, it's very important that we keep that diversity, we nourish it, because that's the beauty of our collective. We don't want everybody to look the same. We passed that ideology a long time ago, I hope, because there was a time, as you know, where many cultures fueled by Roman intentions and Roman visions decided to ravage the world and keep everything the same. That is homogenization of culture around the world. And there's been a lot of pushbacks, and you know how much wars that cost us all. But eventually, they came to the realization that diversity is beautiful. And so that's an improvement, that diversity is beautiful. But also, not only is it beautiful, we got to keep it harmonious. We got to keep it productive. We've got to nourish it. So yes, identity is so important and should not be compromised, because it is what allows the individual to be themselves and produce at their maximum level, sir. So yes.
I agree with you. Sorry. I agree with you. Perhaps my question was slightly misunderstood. I was talking about identity consciousness versus spirituality, because spirituality is independent of your identity. It doesn't matter whether you are which country, which color you are, which race you are, doesn't matter. Diversity is extremely important, not only because we believe in it. God has created the whole universe is diverse. And as you have rightly said, sir, that we have to respect diversity as a beauty of the whole existence. God has created the whole universe in a very, very diverse way, and we have to respect that. I always give an example that if you have a library, there are hundreds and thousands of different authors and books. That's what God's a library. If you have one book and make million copies of that and put in a building, that's not called a library. So that's like a human society. We have to respect and cherish the differences in our cultures and traditions. At the same time, what I was talking about is when we look inward towards spirituality, then spirituality does not recognize our identity. We are just fundamentally, we are just human beings and one spirit. That's the point I was making.
I thank you for that point of correction. I believe that we have addressed that in a way in my earlier deduction, but to me, what you are saying here is, let me just repeat it in my own understanding, that take for instance an African person practicing Hinduism, that would be what you're referring to. And I want to assure you that that's not too far-fetched from an African practicing Christianity or Islam for that matter, or Judaism or anything like that. That's the same thing for a person of Desi heritage, for instance, practicing Islam. You know, we need to be able to get back to that consciousness, sir. And I want us to be very honest and very objective at this level, because we know what that has caused to the Desi people in its entirety. It gave us Bangladesh, Pakistan, and all kinds of confusions.
Yes.
So I
Yes.
understand. I understand this thing, sir. I understand it very well, sir. So this is again why we have to be very honest with ourselves. See, identity is a very vital reflection of the inner. It's very important that we understand that, sir. This is, our diversity is not just from the outside. There is a harmony between the inside and the outside, and many of us are forced to adopt a different spirituality that does not harmonize with our souls, just because we are either influenced, educated, or whatever, or cultivated, or colonized to it, for that matter. Okay, so it is important for the body and the spirit to be whole, and it is important in order to understand the whole concept of diversity and harmony that you're talking about, that
Yes.
identity is understood, tolerated, accepted, and embraced as it is.
Yes.
That
Yes.
in
That's
spite
what I
of
mean.
that,
Yeah.
and in spite of that, that we're still able to work together and produce for the benefit of the whole, sir.
Right.
That's,
Yes.
Hello,
hi. Good to
Dr.
see you.
Idris.
I love that
Good to
smile.
see
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you for your kind words before. Thank you for what you do for the world. I think African Views serve a great purpose. And your story, I was very taken with your search, what you called your sabbatical.
Yeah.
I relate to it because I also did very similar. And what I wanted to ask you, you know, I'm listening to everyone, and you know, on a mystical level, absolutely, when you hit the mystical oneness of God, you know that this is all an illusion and we are one. Spirit is one, God is one, you know, God is love. But on this earth, we have these different cultures and traditions and this gorgeous diversity, right? And I see you, Dr. Idris, as part of the new paradigm that is a person who can stay rooted in whatever his own tradition and culture is and spiritual beliefs, but wants to understand, will practice and participate in different spiritual traditions. And I wanted to ask you simply this: why? What was your impetus? You open-minded curiosity, your heart. What was the impetus for this great search?
To be honest with you, you already answered that question. Yes, because the impetus is one thing, but and I would admit that it's also because I felt a void in me that I needed to fill, and that void is rooted in curiosity. I wanted to understand when some people say they are, for instance, chosen by God, and the others say, "Oh, I'm preferred by God," and the others say, "I'm empowered by God," and some are lesser gods, and so all of those things, growing up, you challenged by that. And that's why many of our people are still confused today because of this. So for me, I had to go as objective as I possibly could to look for that. And I got to tell you, there are different periods. There was a period of complete honest search, and there was a period of just relish the enjoyment of the diversity and the beauty of that particular religion, the tradition that is being practiced in that religion. And I enjoyed it all. But I also participated in the most honest way as I possibly could. And what I found is really the same thing everywhere. It's like just speaking a different language and calling a spade in varieties of languages. That's what I understood. That's what I realized. And I also realized the shortcoming of all of these religions, that they have not figured it out. And they're all making it up, to be honest with you.
You know, Dr. Idris, I found the same thing in my search, that there was something gorgeous and beautiful. And I fell in love with aspects of different religions.
Yes.
And I saw the underpinning, the oneness. Yet, each one doesn't have the full answer, really. You know, there was a famous rabbi that was a founder of one of the founders of the Interfaith movement, which Guruji knew very well. And he used to say, God gave a piece of his wisdom to each of the religions. But if you want all of my wisdom, you have to talk to one another.
Exactly. So let me, you just nailed it all, because this is exactly what happened. I realized that what we're dealing with here is a jigsaw puzzle. And each part is a part of that big puzzle. And if one is missing, there's a hole on the table within the puzzle. You know, that's really what it comes down to. The answer is in the whole picture.
Yes.
What's so beautiful about it?
Yes. Also, in terms of culture, for example, I say interfaith journeying, interfaith, interreligious learning. I love to travel, right? If I go to Africa, if I immerse myself in that culture, right? I take it home and it lives in my heart and I become bigger, right? I go to India, I immerse myself, know the people, they live in my heart, I become bigger and I become another piece of humanity. It's the same with interfaith and God's wisdom. We learn not only more about the divine, but we learn more about each other. And I always say, if God wanted one religion, there'd be one. If God wanted one skin color, there'd be one, you know? Let's rejoice in our differences. Let's rejoice in our differences.
Yes, and if if the world only knew how beautiful the various religions are. To be honest with you, those who are practicing one religion, I applaud them, but I'm sorry, the beauty is in the whole. And I wanted to mention that I've also had the opportunity to engage the Native American spirituality.
Ah, beautiful.
And anyway, the beauty is in the whole. And that's what's so fascinating.
Yes.
You know,
Dr. Idris, one of my favorite, maybe my very favorite prayer, but I can't just have one. But if I had one, is Native American, where you go to a place of beauty. It could be the top of a mountain or before an ocean, and you lift your arms wide like the wings. Open your heart, they say. Take your countenance, put it out to God, to the nature, to the Great Spirit, and in silence, be grateful. Offer yourself up in surrender and gratitude. Is that not the most beautiful, profound prayer? And it has no words.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
Native American.
So beautifully said, ma'am. So beautifully said.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It is. When I saw it, I do it. I go out in nature, I go to the ocean, and I do it. And it's so powerful. It requires your presence, which is in every religion, you know, talks about the true self, the cosmic self. And that, to have that, requires our complete and utter presence. And no, without ego.
I will ask the question.
Yes, sir.
You wrote somewhere there. Okay.
Namaste, everyone. Brother Wale. Yeah, I met you in some functions which Guruji arranged or co-hosted with you. I have a couple things to ask you. First and foremost, before this journey of studying various religions, what was your background? What's your personal life situation? That's one thing. Number two, I think the solution to all we are talking about is within us. The reason is our mind is the one who creates the difference. Mind can heal and unify. We really have to unlearn everything we have learned. All the worldly knowledge has to go. Religion has all the answers. It's just how we interpret, so we have, if you can give us practical tips of how we can be childlike. When we are little children, there was no differences, there was no animosity. We accepted, acknowledge, live for the moment. So what is the practical solution you may suggest from all this learning, all this time invested in your journey? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. It's great to see you. Of course, I remember all our experiences, and we're also friends on Facebook. So
Yeah,
let's keep that up.
I'm Brother Oneness, by the way.
Yes, I know.
That's what I preach, just oneness of all, every chance I get. So.
It's the good way. My journey started in Lagos, Nigeria. My father comes from a royal background, and my mother comes from, I'm a Yoruba. I don't know if you know, the Yoruba people are one of the most spiritual people in Africa.
Basically Christians?
Yeah, the Yorubas. They have heritage in Egypt, and they're rooted now in Nigeria. They spread it all over the world, much of through slavery and all kinds of dispositions and predispositions and interest and ambition and so on and so forth. So they're all over the world now.
So,
and that
question there, Yoruba is they worship nature, they worship Christianity, Islam.
So the Yoruba people are a very spiritual people. Let me give you a good background of them. I actually wrote about that also on academia. If you look at the history of Lagos, you find a good narrative of the Yoruba people. But let me just give it to you. The Yorubas were in Egypt in prehistoric age. They were the idol worshippers that were kicked out of Egypt by the Assyrians. The name came about because when the temple was destroyed, they were going to wage war, and one of the wise elders said, "Why do you want to fight on behalf of God when God is almighty? Let God deal with whoever destroys the temple." And their name came from that source. So when the Assyrian invaded, this was prehistoric age that we're talking about, they fled southwards towards the southern part of Africa until they stopped shore at the ocean, and that's where they settled in the Yoruba area. Now, the Yoruba people, if you Google any African traditional or spiritual, you will see a bunch of names of gods like Oshun, Ogun, Shango, Olodumare, Obatala, etc. All these deities. I tell you that the Yorubas have equal amount of deities, or perhaps even
Like
more
Indian gods.
than as India. So if you just look at it from that concept, you'll understand it properly. And
Unity, diversity.
it's fascinating. And one of the most beautiful temples that I've seen recently is the one in Trinidad and Tobago, and it's an Indian temple right by the ocean. And what's so fascinating about this is the various deities. So you have a pantheon pretty much, and you have various deities that are worshipped in that single temple. And you hardly see that because you always have maybe just a group of god images in a particular temple, and they don't deal with this. And so, but in this one, you have it all. And it was I recommend you visit this in Port of Spain if you have a chance. It's a really beautiful thing. And that's the same thing that the Yorubas have. There are some of this in Brazil, and there are some of this in Cuba. There are lots of it in Yoruba land.
Is there one in New York?
I think there are some, but I am not sure where exactly. But if you Google it, you might be able to find some. They're also very welcoming, just like any other temple. I mean, I walk into these temples and I was completely welcomed. But in all the temples, and really engaged and embraced. Now, so I just said that as my traditional background, and I wish that I was able to participate in this from the get-go. What is interesting was I really never had a chance to participate in this culture as a child because my parents were sort of like middle-class people, and they were aspiring to, colonial mentality, if you will. They want to speak English all the time. I wasn't even allowed to speak Yoruba at home. And by my second birthday, I was already in school. You got to understand this. I think at some function, my parents met who was related to us, the proprietress of this wonderful, wonderful school for children, which was founded in 1947. You have to imagine 1947 in Africa is deep colonial period. And this was an African school founded by a woman. I think that should give you the picture of what we're talking about here. And it was just a beautiful school on top of the mountain. Now, when this lady met us at the function, she told my parents, after speaking to me, that the child is right for school, and convinced my parents to actually leave me in the school. I was not even 2 years old. Not even, because I celebrated my second year birthday, and on that birthday was the day that I became a boarding school student.
Oh my goodness.
Now you got to understand this. Being at a boarding school at 2 years old, and the reason I became a boarding school student at that school was because my parents lived in another town, another state as a matter of fact, so they had to go back. And they would have had to take me with them, and this woman convinced them that she was going to take care of me. And I had someone assigned to me. She was a Scottish woman, very skinny, and very busy. And I could not eat solid food. So I was at school using feeding bottles. So you got to understand his upbringing. And
you're still wearing the diaper, right?
Probably. Probably. But that's how it started. And I was in the boarding school throughout my youth life until I traveled to do my high school in Austria, and then my university in Austria, and so on and so forth, before coming to the United States. I came to the United States to complete my thesis, which was the writing on the authenticity of Americanism, which means that I had to, and at that time they didn't have computers, not as, I mean, they did obviously, but you have to like find the computers. Not many people had personal computers, maybe one in one library. And I had to do a lot of my writings in by hand, so I've written few theses on vector reality that dealt with human capacity to communicate through vectors and also receive information through vectors, which has to do with the human neuron systems and things like that. And then the authenticity of Americanism, which has to do with philosophy. And that's a path of philosophy that's called nomology. Nomology is the study of minds. So again, coming from Vienna, Austria, this type of philosophical faculty is frequent. So you may remember Freud and all those people who did so many things in the branch of philosophy to move humanity forward. Anyway, so that's pretty much the short form of my background. Thank you.
So it's practical solution for how we can become childlike.
Yes, sir. Again, I think obviously you're talking about a whole lifetime for the extent of humanity. We're talking about childhood programming, youth programming, and adulthood consistencies. And there are some people who can do all of that, and there is a name for them. They call the fully integral minds. Many, not many, few have been able to do it, but it gets really confusing for many, many people. I'll give you a good example. Take, for instance, Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson was as pure a child as could be. He was devoted to the world. He knew no boundaries. Everybody was beautiful to him. He was the embodiment of oneness at some point. And he wanted to reflect that. And he started to, he wanted to reflect what he felt inside. And he started on his body, and obviously we saw the result of that. He became quite friends with Deepak Chopra. He was very close to he was trying to be that, but again, it became very challenging for him and led to upkeeping that obviously led to his demise. And I think we have that in perhaps many cultures. So the oneness that people aspire to be fully integral and to be fully extensive and desirable, especially that word desirable is where the confusion comes in, because we might not need to be that desirable in order to be embraced. That's the challenge, and that's perhaps what we need to be. We need to understand ourselves, and we need to be infusing. We need to be teaching that the effort to be desirable, not to please the mainstream or to is perhaps not the right intention for human development. That the development of self is the ability and the capacity to contribute to the benefit of the whole, right? And that itself is the beauty that we should aspire to, and that should be enough to be embraced. But as my uncle said earlier, Honorable Kapal said earlier, that the challenge between identity and performance and spirituality, which is inside this disparity. Again, this I believe is where the balance should be. And if we are able to create a greater mass of people with that type of mindset, we'll have a new common man. And that's where the embrace would be, because then a group of diverse people can gather together without thinking of what separates them, but that which unites them, right? Which is their purpose.
Yes.
And they are happy and beautiful about that. And they don't even for a minute forget their different identities, that they respect that and they embrace it and they understand that that is strength for them. So I think that's the direction. And I hope we can get there.
Thank you very much. My goal is always to say, your way is my way. Thank you. God bless you.
Thank you, sir.
Reverend Doris, you have to ask something.
Yes. First of all, I want to say this is my first opportunity to meet Dr. Idris. I have enjoyed your message today, and thank you very much for the information that you've shared with us. At the beginning of your message, you talked about culture and religion. And the two of those, to me, are like hand in glove. And I always like to go back to the story of creation. And that formed the basis of how I interact with the world. Because it starts for me like, and I choose to believe that when God created the world, it was created with such diversity. Because if you look at outer space, there's one existence, which we are still quite unfamiliar with, but it's yet there. And we look at planet Earth and the other planets. Some are unfamiliar and we continue to study them. And then we look at planet Earth. And then we look at the different dimensions that exist and the different descriptives, the distinction between the different parts of planet Earth. And that says to me that there is a unity innate in the creation of the universe. At another level, when we look at all things that were created in the universe, the bees, the birds, the earthworms, each has its own unique anointing. And if you remove either one of those, the birds, the earthworms, the trees, if you remove either one of those out of the functionality of the universe, there would be total disaster. Because one plays that critical of a role to each. So for me, that forms a foundation of unity and the importance of all things in the universe and the wonder of all things in the universe because of its role to contribute to the functionality of all that is. I've traveled to different parts of the world and the different parts of Africa, traveled to the Soviet Union, to Mexico, to China, to Cuba. And what I found, again, is an expression of uniqueness. Each one has spices that they use. We use all those spices here in the United States, but when you go to a different continent, they use them in a very different way, but that doesn't say it's not good or bad. So often when we think of our religion, it goes down to another level for me. And as I was growing up, it was whichever church I went to, people wanted to recruit you to their church because they wanted to tell you that my church is better than your church. Not that we have the same God, but you have to come over. I want you to come over here because we do it right. And if you come to what we are doing and join us, then you're going to go to heaven. So much of what I believe is a concern that so often we still serve in that mentality. We still take on that way of thinking in a very spiritual sense, as opposed to, in my mind, looking at the unity of the creation of the universe and how in our oneness with that creative force, we are all here to serve that one force and to serve each other. So I guess my question to you is, you've offered a lot of options here, a lot of ways to consider where we are and particularly the challenges that we are faced with today, what one thing, and I know it's difficult to say what one thing, what would you say if you had one thought to offer? What would that be?
Thank you. Thank you. You know, I think when it comes to creation, everyone, every group, and every religion is sort of predisposed to their own imagination. And one is just as fantastic as the other. And even science offers an option for us about the bank theory. And it's all well and good. So to me, what would we do with that type of knowledge? What if we knew? What would we do? How can that help us with this situation today? How can that help us? I don't know if it's going to help us be a better person or better people or better society just because we knew how we started. It may be a great disappointment. It may cause us to want to kill each other. I don't know. So I don't go that far, to be honest with you. I want to act because I don't want to. There's been historically some philosophers who went well far to answer these questions, because what you're asking really is if or not God exists, because obviously it happens and it's supposed to be God's creation, and I have no doubt about it. But it's a to me it's a question that leads us nowhere. So I don't pay too much attention to it. I don't pay attention to where we're going afterwards either. I just know that if I should die today and I have unfinished work, I'm not going to give up. Whatever happens to my soul, I'm still going to continue working. That much I know. So, but regarding to the proselytization of the idea, which is very prevalent in Christianity, less in any other religion, not even Islam, other than the previous campaign. Well, there's still some campaign going on with Islam and spreading the Islamic reach. But again, all of those are religions that that have tasted power, and because of, again, remember we discussed this, regardless of any type of system you create, it is human beings that's going to run it, and human beings carry their baggage with them. You know, brings us to the beginning of Christianity. One man came along and said, we can't worship Caesar. Caesar is a man, he's not a god. You should not worship Caesar. There is a God that is above everybody else, and he's in heaven, and he's my father, by the way. Oh, I mean, it's a crazy idea. They nailed him to the cross for it, you know. Don't forget, it's the same Christianity that banned Galileo because he said the world is not flat, it is round. And there are others out there, or there's all, you know, we're in the center of the universe. So I want you to begin to put those things in perspective of where we are in time. Okay, so again, what I'm talking about with proselytization in especially prevalent in Christianity, is the fact that there is a need to cultivate power. That power could be for economic reason, it could be for political reasons, social reason, whatever the case may be. It is that desire to want people to come worship with them, come to this church, or this faction and that faction, which creates this infinite amount of schisms that we have in the Christendom. You know, that's all well and good, because again, it's people creating identity and people creating, you know, led by whatever interest behind them. Again, to me, it is devoid of authenticity, and it's a sad part of life, to be honest with you. And I really hope that we can find a way to correct it because of the damage it does to the society. And if you look in developing countries around the world where people are struggling and looking for hope and anything to hang on to in order to have some kind of rationality about life and the environment they live in, you'll see this type of religious power tussle really prevailing over there. And it doesn't bring performance, it doesn't help development. For the most part, it's pervasive and pervading. So to me, we really need to be careful about uh, about this illusion and also the dishonesty, whether it's intentional or it's acculturated. We need to work very, very hard. We need to work so hard to understand. And that's one of the reasons, for instance, that I went to understand other religions as well, to see what's behind it and why and if there's correlations and if this is something that's normal and if there's no other way out. And when you begin to compare this, you see not only are there alternatives, which is why many people are going to other religions for that matter. And the question remains that, is religion really the solution to the hopelessness and the search for hope?
Yeah, I think I agree with you, because when you look at the data, so much of our population is moving away from the traditional practices of religion. It's going more to the practices of the faith paths that gives one options to choose how they will serve and how they will practice and how they will decide what works for them individually. Yeah.
Yeah, and I must add that, you know, it takes a long time. As I mentioned earlier, if you look at the beginning of Christianity, after Jesus Christ was killed, he never really wanted to found a religion. He just wanted to, you know, that day Caesar was in control and beating up the Jews, and he wanted solidarity. He wanted freedom, and he said to them, the first thing is not to worship this guy. There's a God bigger. And again, he wasn't just preaching to Caesar, he was preaching to the people. And at that time, Rome was in control, beating up everybody else and calling everybody else barbarians, who are lower people than people of Rome. You got to understand this. And after he was killed, all his disciples were chased wherever, lynched. I mean, they were the criminals of the day. They were the Bin Ladens. They found them everywhere, killed every bit of them, right? Don't forget, this is the truth. And got forgotten. They were not to be remembered. And Caesar and Rome continued their reign for another 300 years until there came a time when Rome was in desperate need for another political solution. They realized that force is no longer working. They needed a new campaign. And the mother of then Emperor Constantine decided, or maybe, you know, got these spiritual, some people thought she was mad, but she decided that she needed to reconnect with Jesus Christ, who was killed 300 years ago. And this was how this revival came about. And the campaign took a new change, took a new direction, because before Rome was just beating them up and claiming their lands because of their military capacity. And now it realized that you can conquer the body, but you can't conquer the spirit, because the people are always rebelling. So as long as the spirit remains, they will come back. And Rome was frustrated with that. So they decided to conquer the spirit as well. And this Christianity was able to do that. And not only was it able to do that, he gave, the Roman relics the rest of the world, because that was the reason, gave them reason to fight, because many didn't understand the real concept behind it, but it was enough for them to take the fight on. That remains a challenge today. That remains a challenge today. And that's why it is important to merge. When it comes to identity, you see the disparity there. If you look at the basis of what is and what we ought to be and where we ought to be going, you know, we have to find a balance and remove as much confusion in our lives as much as possible. All religions are wonderful and beautiful if we make them be. They just have to be peaceful and they have to be harmonious. We have to make others envy the beauty of our traditions.
Yes. My practice is eclectic.
Thank you, ma'am.
Dr. Wale, including me, we have 4 more people to ask questions. Can we extend the time 15 more minutes?
For you, my dear Guruji, you know that.
So I'll ask Ranjit Sharma from Delhi, India. He's here. He would like to ask question.
Thank you so much, Guruji. Dr. Wale, I must say that very few people in the world are so fortunate to have experienced so many religions in their lifetimes. Actually, I had a question related to your experiences, but most of my questions have already been addressed in today's discussion. But just for the sake of my and everyone's benefit, I would request you to kindly let us know if you have found any commonalities in all the religions that you have studied. If yes, kindly sum up or list down the most common factors that you have observed in all the religions.
I guess that's what I
Thank you.
wanted to know.
Well, thank you very much. And without any effort at all, the purpose of any religion is to seek God, to serve God. This really is a unifying factor. No matter how they slice it, no matter how they dice it, they are all looking to serve the Creator, the Almighty, that which is all-encompassing. The only difference is not so much in the principle or the tradition of observation, but the mindset, and I think this may even be different by groups or individuals and so on, but people often seek the face of God in order to have power, to harness the power. You know, it's like searching for oil or searching for gold where you want to just accumulate it. You know, that really is a difference in many parts. Or some who are not proselytizing, they just want to cultivate this little knowledge and you know, hide it from, because again, imagine if you have something that is precious, you hardly want to share it. You hardly want to share it. This is important. And some who are eager to share what they call precious are always looking for power. And those who believe they have it and they don't want to share, we're talking about even very secret groups. And there are many of them, many that we cannot even count, and as powerful as we cannot even imagine. Okay, so they have ways, they have traditions of cultivating power, but always, regardless of how complicated the religion is or the tradition is really to seek power, and that power is that which God has endowed. Even we see it in science. We see it in science. And it's, again, but we confuse all of this, which has been endowed to us as humans. We have the will. We have the will. But I think that God has the power. Power is not in our nuclear bombs. That's just our will to do nonsense. You know, power is not in the automobiles that we drive around. That's just our will, and we are endowed by that. So we confuse this with the greater existence that is beyond, and it's fine because our imagination are predisposed, but that's the common thing that people seek is that power. Um, and I think that uh, you know ethics cannot be stagnant because of evolution, right? So we grow with time, and therefore, all certain principles may need certain adjustments. Even constitutions get revised. So all these ancient books, as beautiful as they are, uh, even though I'm not really for their revision, but there ought to be some guide into it, into all these books, so that we can understand the principle that keeps us humane, that really not only that serves our humanism, but serves our humanity as we progress in the line of evolution. So I think that one other thing that all these religions have in common is room for improvement, room for adjustment. Um, they will never agree because they could agree coming together like us and having this discussion, but when they go back, they will keep their principles and they'll keep their traditions, I think. I don't know, miracles could happen. There could be something that brings everybody and wipes up away all the contradictions. But until then, I think that the contradictions help them to keep their path. Um, they keep their paths, and it's important for them to keep their path because it allows them to, at least in their belief, to keep their identities. And that identity is important to recognize their culture or cultural frames, as well as their power, whatever that power serves. So, and I think we need to understand it and embrace it, as long as we continue to look for the common good. And I hope that all religions continue to look for the common good. And I mean that by heart. All religions to please look forward to the common good. Then we would have solved the problem, because that's as simple as it gets. That's as simple as it takes. So yes, there's room for improvement for all religions. And what it is that they have mostly in common, not only the search for God, but also the purpose of the common good. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Dr. Remy.
Hi, Dr. Wale. Good to hear you today. You made some very insightful events. And, as a fellow African, I wanted to ask about your African views on African spirituality, especially the Yoruba culture and religion, that many people know that, out of all the maybe traditions or religions in Africa, is one of the most widespread religion or culture or practice outside of Africa. How can we continue to maintain, the practice of the Yoruba religion and form like a linkage between or amongst other religions who maybe when they hear of Africa or African religion or African traditional religion, most of what they think of is evil spirit or wickedness or, like a wicked voodoo type practice, because right after the Spirit of Peace conference, or actually during the Spirit of Peace conference, when we had the morning forums, Guru Dileepji was there. And one of the questions that I asked him was that, in India, so diverse, how have Indians been able to maintain their religious and cultural practices and still remain Indians, even with being colonized and, influences from other places? And they're still able to maintain their spiritual practices without being ashamed or afraid of, practicing their culture or tradition. So do you have any suggestions or ideas on how to further promote, African culture and tradition, especially the Yoruba culture and tradition? And also, if we're able, continue or expand on the practice, what world religion or practice would you say it has similarity or has some commonalities with?
Thank you. I'm so happy, really joyful that you asked me this question. Thank you very much. It would have been incomplete if we have not been able to speak about this. Before I start, I want to mention, with the permission of my brother, uncles here today from the Desi heritage, that India was resilient from the get-go because India had a unifying story. They had the Mahabharata, which gave a very good perspective of creation. This is very important. As a matter of fact, we go back to that earlier question of creation. And every culture has a story of creation. And with India, I would say that, yes, what we see in India today it's a wonderful reflection of humanity. But it didn't happen without being skated. Let's put it that way. Because don't forget, India lost a lot of its people to other religions, including Islam. But they have resisted the Greek from the start. That's where they beat up the Alexander boy from Greek. And after his pillage from Egypt and all the rest of that. So I don't mean that in a derogatory sense, but it had to be said, because that's what calling a spade is. Because there had been violence has been perpetrated in the world, perhaps in all cultures. And there are certain aspects of goodness in religion because it sort of like brought peace, but certain religions also brought war. In India's case, as I mentioned, you were able to see the revival. I mean, India has gone through a lot of challenges, but it has also was able to again have its unifying factor. That's the word, unifying factor, which is the concept and the story of creation by the Mahabharata. If you look at all religions and all developed society, they have this type of unifying factor. And even before they could write, okay, they were able to tell the stories of each of their elements, of their deities, of their beliefs, of their traditions, and those are the things that kept them grounded in their belief that what they have is authentic. That's what dying for. That's what it means, and they did. But of course, as mentioned, they lost many parts, but thank God they're standing today, and that they are envy of the world. Now, let's move to the African context. Okay. We have forgotten so much. And we have forgotten because we have been bitten to forget. You got to understand what I'm saying here. Much long ago, when the world was peaceful, the name Africa, people don't know, actually came from Greek word Afrike, which means the warm and peaceful place. Now, that's where and why all the warring Greeks and the Turks would come to Africa to chill. And that's why Rome took the battle to Carthage, because that's where they were, the barbarians. And don't forget the Hannibal challenge of Rome. So that proximity. But what I'm trying to say here is that in those days, when a society is pillaged and conquered, they often extract them from memories that are valuable to them. This is very important for us to know. So in the African context, over a period of time, there's been a lot of dispersions, and people have gone in different ways, and they have cultivated new languages, and they've forgotten even how related they ever were. Now, let me tell you about new languages. People think, oh no, language cultures that's supposed to like be parallel. No, people can easily cultivate a new language over a very short period of time. Haiti is a good example of that. They speak an African language in Haiti today that's not spoken anywhere. They do it in Suriname. They do it in many places. So we can see that pattern and understand that the dispersion that occurred in Africa has been rooted in a lot of forgetfulness. That's the beginning. However, the Yorubas were able to recultivate much of that spirituality while they settled in the Yoruba land of Ile-Ife. And because of that recultivation, when colonialism came, both earlier from the Islamic incursion, and much centuries after, when the Christian incursion came, colonialism came, they were able to resist and persist on their religion, but they didn't go unscathed, as you know. A larger percentage of people today in Yoruba land and everywhere else in Africa are either Muslims or Christians. They have lost the greater part of their beings, to be honest with you. Now you got to understand what I'm talking about here. We spoke about spirituality and identity and the harmony of that in a human being to be whole. It's important. You know, we have to try, but it's understandable. Just begin to understand it, okay? It's like your food. It's like your food. And it's like many other things. We can compare with language because we can speak 1,000 languages, but still have one core language that is what you call your mother tongue. That's you in the core. But that's not your intelligence, because your intelligence could spread across all kinds of cultures and languages, you see. This is where I want us to understand these different subtleties, because they're there. So the remnants of the African deity, the African spirituality, much of which you find in Yoruba land, you have them also in other African countries, even throughout the empires of the Malian Empire, the Ghanaian, the Soninke, the Songhai, and all of those people, they still have it. Now, even when the Islamic jihadist campaign came into the area, the Niger area that became Nigeria today, and they got up all the northern people who were the Hausas were the second wave of colonialism in the north before the Fulanese, right? So when the Hausas came, there were they had some people there, and they colonized these people, okay? So the Fulanis then came with the jihadists and then colonized the houses, right? It's important we know this. What they didn't like about the houses was that they were practicing traditional beliefs with Islam. So you bring Islam, they said, okay, fine with Islam, let's get it on. But they use their traditional methods. This is what separated the Fulanis from the houses. And why you have Fulani kings all over the northern parts of Nigeria. Now let's begin to come down to the south, right? So up until Ilorin, which is the border country or border state of Kwara between the northern part and the southern part where the Yorubas are. The Igbos is another thing, they have their own concept. The challenges came mostly from Christianity. Now in the Yoruba land, you have both the Islamic incursion and the Christian incursion coming from the sea and those Islamic coming from the south. This is important that you understand that this was coming from both ends, which is why much of the traditions were yielded to the mundane and the power of the day religions like Islam and Christianity. However, after all of that, there was again a revival of this because it was really difficult to keep those religions during the colonial period. The colonials took all that was valuable that they could lay their hands on for the purpose of wiping out that memory. And it's important that you begin to understand the spiritual, our African spiritual system. The African spiritual system believes so much in reincarnations. And because of that belief, much of this was able to come back. It's actually very interesting. Much of this was able to come back because of this spiritual, this reincarnation. And they were able to restore the kings. And the kings who were the custodians of culture were able to revive all the traditional parts. They brought up the relics and they rose from the ashes. And so you see that movement today coming back. It's a slow movement because of the huge presence of the prevailing Christianity and Islam. And we're talking about strong economic power here, filled with everything that we've spoken about before, okay? However, these traditions are coming up. They're finding new ways to revive them, to make them appealing, to make them less challenging as it usually was. Maybe before, there used to be human sacrifices, maybe goat sacrifices, whatever spill of blood, right? This is not just African culture. This was everywhere. They had all kinds of, that was what the Christendom had to take away from Europe before being able to unify them, because they were all pagans, as they call them, and it was a lot of blood sacrifices. So one of the things was, we only had one blood to sacrifice, and that's the blood of Jesus Christ. And that's why they always use that word, sacrifice the blood of Jesus Christ, and they eat his flesh in whatever symbolic form. So you see that now in Africa, and especially in the Yoruba, also revising those challenges and those parameters of type of sacrifices that needed to be done. That's making it now appealing because it's now competitive, right? It's competitive on a greater end to the challenges of Christianity and Islam. And it's important to know that many of these people who practice the mainstream religions also love to participate in the traditional spiritual festivals because it reflects their identity, it's their culture. It makes them whole. They feel part of it, right? And so we are in that time now that things are being reconsidered and revival is slowly coming. And what's so beautiful here is the appeal of stories yet untold. It's the appeal of that mythical book that is a unifying factor that remains to be written, that can be comparative to the Bible or to the Quran or to the Mahabharata or any other kind of religious book, you see. So all of these are things that are possible and coming. And it would be a disaster to the world if that knowledge is not unfolded and told. You see, so there's a whole lot of missing parts here. And that's the beauty of it. And because all of this is because the world is now recognizing the beauty of diversity. You know, no longer the homogenization of culture necessary or important or even useful to the humankind. We are now embracing our diversity, and therefore we are allowing all the seeds that have been killed over the years to regerminate and grow. And the importance of it really is growing in the direction where it serves humanity as a whole. I hope I've answered your question. So there is so much beauty coming in all these deities. In Yoruba culture alone, they have 400 gods. 400 deities. When I say God, it's the lower kind of the deities, because they still believe in one God, who is the Olodumare. Okay, and now you see professors and academics coming up and talking about parallels. You may have heard of the parallel between Socrates and Orunmila, for instance. Orunmila was one of the wisest Yoruba elder in the community, and he was so wise that, just like Socrates, he didn't write anything down, but his knowledge was passed on and on for generations, you see. And the wonderful thing here is that there's all this oral history that has passed generations. And the Yorubas have a system called the Ifa divination, which can revive even the forgotten stories of time. It's fascinating. And it works like the computer systems with the one and the twos, or the zeros and the ones, or some. It's an amazing, fascinating concept that requires its own study and faculty. So it's you can see that how beautiful the world is and how far behind we still are. But the good thing is that we can see the horizon and we can see the bright light at the end of the tunnel. Thank you.
Gabriel.
Namaste, Wale. Good to hear from you again. Your story is such an inspiration. I just wanted to find out if it's possible and how it's possible to access spirituality within the religious domain. If a child is born within a certain religion and they're searching for answers beyond what the religion, but they grow accustomed to the religion, they love the religion, they're interconnected with their family, which is very deeply religious. How is it possible for one to be able to access the spiritual domain and grow within the religion, if it's possible? Thank you.
Thank you for asking that question. It would have, again, been incomplete without that question. And I have perfect examples for it. First of all, we would have failed in all our work if that was not possible. And I think, again, that was what the Honorable Kapal was alluding to earlier. Here's the situation. There was, you should look up this name, Suzanne Wenger, isn't it? Suzanne Wenger. Suzanne Wenger was an Austrian journalist, so to speak, who traveled with her husband, Uli Bear, to Africa, sometimes in the 50s or 60s, around that time. And they went to, they traveled around as tourists, and they went to a spiritual place in Yoruba land. Susan Wenger is Austrian, and I think Uli Bear, who was the husband, was German. It's like Canada, United States, when you're talking about Germany and Austria, even closer than that. Anyway, so the Susan Wenger fell in love with the culture of the people, completely fell in love, and fell in love with her heart. And this is important. You know, I remember when we opened this, we talked about love. And there's no power just greater than love, especially when it's pure. She fell in love with the culture, and she started to learn the language, and she immersed herself in the traditions of the place, and eventually she became the priestess of one of the one of the highest temples in that land over the years. This woman spoke Yoruba. Not only did she speak Yoruba as fluent as possible, she also taught at the university level for that language. And she really transformed the city to reflect the priesthood that she was bestowed. This is amazing. And I use that as an example so that we understand that what you're talking about is as necessary and as important. If you understood and fell in love with what you understand, and you're allowed to practice it, and you embrace, so to speak, you welcome, you embraced into it. Because if you have to fight for it, you know, eventually it doesn't work. But if you're welcome into it and you saw the love that's reciprocated, there's nothing more beautiful than that. As a matter of fact, that's what we desire in the world. That's why there's all this ability and this opportunity for crossovers. And the crossovers are the beauties of the world. They are the ones who make the world so beautiful, because they allow us to reflect each other in each other, whether it's cross-cultural marriages or all these things. But as long as it's pure, it is just as whole. Thank you. I hope I've answered it.
So that's the last question from me. I just waited for everybody to ask. So I know when you look at the history of the world, slavery happened in different forms. Still we have slavery in different forms. And look at the tradition, I think Africans had more hard time. It damaged their entire life for the future. And we had to take them out from this, all the grievance and all the issues, psychological issues and social issues. What we, the international community can do it, because we owe them really, you know. So what is in your point? What we had to do in the future?
Thank you. Yeah, and I think it comes down to that, you know. The first thing is for the world to know, because whichever side of the world we are, whether it's from religion, academic, there's always this important dichotomy of what is good and what is bad. This is really all that we're learning. You know, you want to build a car, a tire is good, spinal is bad. So just an example, you know, you want to plant a seed, this is good, that's bad. We know all of that in all directions and everything that we are engaged with in our life. We know the difference between good and bad, and that really should be the purpose of our spirituality. Which is why we need the truth, because oftentimes if the information we receive is distorted, our decision of what's good and bad is skewed. So it is very important for the world to know what is truly good and what is truly bad, and understand that first, from the picture of the outcome, that a suffering people in humanity is a bad thing. And then we want to look at why there is a suffering and understand from the beginning and begin to figure out how we can not only resolve a sovereign humanity, but also appease the memory of the suffering and heal. Because when any part of the whole, remember the concept of the whole, when any part of the whole is suffering, one way or the other, we all are suffering. And those who don't feel that they are, you know, why should they care? Then they have a bigger problem. The bigger problem is the problem of lack of empathy. And that's not the type of world we want, because if you lack empathy, that's even a bigger problem than the one that needs the empathy, you see? So we have to begin to look at things from that point of view. And the first thing is to understand what this suffering is about and why. And because we are predisposed with the knowledge of what is good and what is bad, whether we know it, we feel it for sure. And because we feel it, we can empathize that if we were in that stage, we would feel perhaps just the same or just as uncomfortable. And we would begin to support the need of wholeness. Many of the situations in the United States today, especially the new immigrants, it's important we touch this area because, first of all, the whole concept of human suffering that's belabored in the African society is not just in the United States. It's pretty much in the larger part of the world. But United States is important because it's very different here, and people here are supposed to be the leaders of the world. So they make examples of the world, and the rest of the world oftentimes follow. So it's important that we look at it from here. So the problem is when many of the new immigrants come, they don't understand the stories behind the situation that they see, and they say, look at these people, you know, you got all these good things here and you don't take advantage of it. You start fighting for power. Why do you want political office? Or why do you do this? Why do you riot? Why do you blah, blah, blah? They go on and say all kinds of things. But what they do not know is what led to that. Why, how, when, and so on and so forth. And even that the benefit so far that everybody, especially immigrants like me and many others, would come here to enjoy has been because of the struggle of these people. So it's important for us to be able to understand and not quick to judge. And that when we have a full understanding, we rely on our mental faculty and our arguments to allow us to judge correctly what right action is. I don't know how to protest violently on the street. I can't do that, but I know how to think. So I allowed myself to do that and come up with something that could support that interest and mitigate that suffering. And I think all of us can do that, mitigate that suffering, because there's no point in the spectacle of a suffering humanity. I hope I've answered your question.
Okay. Yeah, we already reached 2 o'clock. Thank you, Dr. Wale. So next 2 weeks, I want people, I know Doris was not able to speak last time. If she's able to do it, that will be welcome for next week, Doris.
Yes.
Okay, good. Then after next week, maybe Ranjit Sharma can speak. Ranjit?
That will be really wonderful, sir.
Okay, so 9 will be Reverend Doris and 16 will be Ranjit. And
Thank you, Guruji.
yeah, 14th we have the World Peace Festival, I need everybody's help. I saw Doris' email today, and few other people wrote. And Wale, I need full support. We had mobilized very well. This is our 31st annual event, even though I start events before. Yeah, peace is a big thing for us. Especially traditionally, my birthday will fall in September, traditional way. Officially is October 4th. We'll have another event on that day. So, is there any other questions?
I just want to say to the doctor that I had 2 years of Yoruba teaching with a Yoruba priestess. So, and I incorporate many of those practices in my spiritual practice. So, thank you for today.
Dr. Wale, any other comments?
I just want to thank you again for this opportunity. It's just really good to be able to talk to you all, knowing that we are all coming from the same background, same perspective, background in the sense of spirituality and spiritual depths, and that this discussion is desirable and understandable within us, because it's not something that is can be easily discussed in public arena, as you know, especially in the depth that we have taken it. So I really appreciate that tolerance, and I thank you so much for the opportunity.
So this all we already recording. We are going to put it on the social YouTube. Within 2 days it will be ready. So this is so. Thank you, Wale, for your wonderful sharing of your life, and your thoughts. This is a real spirituality more than religious stuff. I like spiritual things. We didn't feel the time is flying 2 hours, going on and on. And people are asking questions who can stay longer, fine. In traditional way, we say Gurukula system will say this is satsang, like those who same like-minded people, they have these thought patterns in the same way. Come together, there's no time limit. My uncle used to do like a 3 days conference between Christmas and New Year, day and night discussion. And people come from different parts of the country. Sometimes people come from Europe, South America. They like to be part of it, even though they don't understand the language. You speak English, so this is the way it's supposed to be. So we are opening up for the people to come be part of it. Thank you, everyone. So see you on Wednesday. In between, we'll communicate through Facebook and email. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.